Canada's fury. Are we about to annex America? Ever wonder what's brewing north of the border? Turns out it's not just maple syrup and politeness. Canada's got a serious case of the grumps with its southern neighbor, and we're here to break down why, with a healthy dose of Canadian bacon-flavored sarcasm. Let's be honest, being next to the U.S. is like living next to a rock star who throws wild parties every night. Exciting at first, but eventually, you just want some peace and quiet. And Canada, they've had enough. Trade tantrums, tariffs, betrayals, and broken deals. Remember when the U.S. slapped tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum? Canada sure does. It's like borrowing your neighbor's lawnmower and returning it with a dent and a sorry, not sorry note. Ontario Premier Doug Ford wasn't amused. His response: if they want to try to annihilate Ontario, I will do everything, including cut off their energy, with a smile on my face. And he actually meant it. Ontario slapped a 25% tax on electricity exports to the U.S. as payback, which led to a tariff war faster than a beaver on Red Bull. Even Trump couldn't resist chiming in with another classic. Canada only works as a state. Wait, what? Canada, a state? Imagine if Trudeau had responded with, and America only works with a functioning democracy. No wonder Zach Beauchamp from Vox said, Canadians are angry, just out of this world angry about what the United States is doing to them. And honestly, rightfully so. It's not just about economics and politics. Canada's also a little ticked off about something else. Americans stealing their culture. Americans love poutine until they rename it Freedom Fries with Gravy. They visit Niagara Falls, but pretend New York side is better. And let's not forget, Canada gave the world hockey, but somehow the Stanley Cup keeps ending up in the U.S. And then there's the worst offense of all, calling Canada America's hat. Excuse me, if Canada's a hat, then America is the sweaty forehead underneath. Ah, healthcare, the great American debate. Canada's universal system is often described in the U.S. as a socialist horror show where people supposedly wait decades for an X-ray. Here's the reality. It's a trade-off. Yes, wait times can be annoying, but at least Canadians don't go bankrupt over a broken leg. And while Americans are out there paying $300 just for an ambulance, Canadians are just sitting back, sipping Tim Hortons, knowing they won't need to sell a kidney to afford health care. Even Trudeau had to remind everyone, we want our things to go back to the way they were, but you keep threatening us, and so we have no choice but to fight back. At this rate, Canada's revenge might just be offering free healthcare to Americans, just to watch the chaos unfold. Canada's oil sands, not great for the environment. No argument there. But the U.S. pointing fingers while still importing oil from countries with worse regulations. Now that's rich. It's like yelling at your neighbor for having a messy yard while your own house is literally on fire. Canada knows it has work to do, but it's a bit frustrating when the U.S. dumps pollution into the air and then lectures others about carbon footprints. Maybe America should clean its own room before telling Canada to tidy up, eh? For over a century, the Canada-U.S. border has been one of the most peaceful in the world. There's literally a bridge called the Peace Bridge between Buffalo and Ontario. And now, that peacefulness is as stable as a Jenga tower in an earthquake. With tariffs, travel bans, and political tensions rising, Canadians are feeling more and more like they need to build their own wall. But instead of keeping Americans out, maybe it's to keep their influence from leaking in. Zach Beauchamp describes the situation best. There's a widespread boycott of American-related goods here in Ontario. At this rate, Americans might need a visa just to buy a bottle of maple syrup. Speaking of things Canadians don't want, let's talk about American-style politics creeping across the border. Canada has its own political battles, but seeing Trumpism leak into Canadian politics is like watching your neighbor's toxic relationship slowly infect your friend group. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, once seen as a potential future prime minister, is now struggling because, well, he sounds a little too American. Now, being close to the U.S. or American style in any way is like a death sentence in Canadian politics. If this trend continues, Canada's biggest political debate might just be whether to put a firewall along the border. So, is Canada really furious at the U.S.? Oh, absolutely. But does that mean they'll strike back? Well, What if they did? Imagine. Free healthcare for all. Americans wouldn't know what to do with themselves. Stricter gun laws, because let's be honest, America needs it. A national holiday for Tim Hortons. Move over. 4th of July. More poutine, less processed cheese. RIP Kraft singles. Would it be the worst thing? Maybe. Maybe not. But one thing's for sure. Canada and the US are like siblings who bicker, argue, and slam doors, but at the end of the day, they need each other. At the end of the day, Canada isn't America's hat. It's a sovereign nation with its own culture, economy, and identity. But if Trump gets a second term, the odds of another economic meltdown, political feud, or even an all-out rupture in US-Canada relations are skyrocketing. Some analysts believe the damage could last decades. Others say both countries will just grumble, make up, and move on, because let's face it, nobody wants a sibling rivalry that ends in a custody battle over Alaska. But hey, if things do get worse, Canada could always return the favor by annexing Florida for the winter. Snowbirds, you've been warned. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Because trust me, there's plenty more where this came from. See you in the next one.